Can you believe that by this time next week, we're going to be talking about actual, real, regular season football? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Sunday Sports Rewind for a live special edition of Cheese and Packers. Chris Barriere, Kelly Price, and as always, happy to be joined by Michael Cohen from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Michael, I hope we're not keeping you up past your bedtime.
No, everything's good. Glad to be here, guys.
Awesome. Great. Well, the Packers' 53-man roster is set. We're going to eat some cheese, and we're going to talk about it. Let's meet the 2017 Packers, shall we? On offense, only 2 quarterbacks in Rodgers and Hundley, only 5 wideouts, 4 running backs, including all 3 draft picks making the cut. That could be key. Defensively, a lot going on at linebacker position. Jaron Elliott traded away to the Cowboys. That makes room for free agent Ahmad Brooks, who officially signed with the team today. So too did free agent Chris Odom. We'll talk about those guys in just a minute. First, injuries and suspensions don't count towards the active roster. So adding lineman Don Barclay to the IR freed up a spot for Ahmad Brooks. There you have it. Perfect balance. 25-0, 25D, and 25 special teams.
And speaking of Brooks and Odom, they obviously bring those guys in. What do these moves mean for that thin pass rushing core, and what is that going to look like moving forward?
Yeah, so on the very first time that we did this, we talked about Mike McCarthy's quote on how he thought there was so much depth at the outside linebacker position. And basically what you've seen over the last couple weeks, I think, is the beginning of an admission that that's not necessarily true. So when you bring in a guy like Brooks, you're looking for size and you're looking for strength. The same thing with Odom, and then obviously losing Jaron Elliott. He's an athlete, but it's not the type of guy that is going to be great in run support. So they wanted to get bigger and stronger.
Well, you know, another thing that is pretty Gouda about this team, after, what are we talking about next, Kelly?
Well, the Packers took a risk when they released Taysom Hill, right? Obviously, that's the third-string quarterback that he proved that he can play. He's claimed by the Saints. They have Joe Callahan on the roster, as you saw for the practice squad. Given that Brett Hundley is a free agent this time next year, was that a risk they should have taken?
You know, so my argument for keeping both Hundley and Hill is not necessarily that Hill is better than Hundley or I think that Hill should surpass Hundley. It's that if eventually you want to try and trade Hundley to get some sort of an asset for him before his contract expires, I think at that point it would have been beneficial to have Taysom Hill and have been grooming him and bringing him along. So I think just the fact that you had somebody who was a prospect that showed he has some athleticism, I think it would have been wise to keep that person. Now obviously the Packers felt differently and he went off to New Orleans claimed on the waiver wire.
This is what I wanted to talk about. I was making a Gouda reference in reference to this Gouda cheese we have here tonight. It is delicious, by the way. 7 wide receivers in the past for Ted Thompson this year, just 5. What's going on there?
Yeah, so I think part of this has to do with the suspension for Geronimo Allison. So as you mentioned, guys who are injured on IR or on the suspended list don't count toward the 53-man roster. So in essence, they have 6. Just one of them isn't available until after week 1. Essentially, what I think you're seeing here is a little bit of a vote of confidence for Trevor Davis and Jeff Janis. The fact that both of the rookie draft picks were cut and only one of them stuck around on the practice squad makes me think that the coaches trust Janis and Davis a little bit more after both of them had solid preseasons. And so I think for those guys, it has to feel good knowing that they're probably going to get more reps.
And some of those guys aren't gone for good. They're still going to be sticking around in the practice squad, which is what we're going to talk about coming up next. We are keeping it spicy like this cheddar jack cheese. When we come back, we'll look at that practice squad that was announced today. You're watching a Sunday Sports Rewind. Live Cheese and Packers. Yum. Welcome back to the show, Michael. We just broke down the active roster and how Gouda those guys have been all training camp. Now let's talk about maybe the mediocre, perhaps a brie cheese. Let's be honest. It's not great, but it's okay. Just as
you can't disagree.
Hey, just as the practice squad is, right? We got 10 guys that Ted Thompson announced this year on the practice squad. Who are they, and who do you look forward to seeing most?
You know, the one guy that I really look at is Reggie Gilbert. I know that it's hard to say who the 54th guy might have been, but I think Reggie Gilbert is a good candidate for that. He had a really strong training camp at the outside linebacker position, and I thought he played his best game Thursday night against the Rams. So this is a guy that definitely thought he was in the picture for the roster, and when he narrowly misses out, the reason he re-signs in Green Bay over 3 other offers is because he knows that outside linebacker is definitely a volatile position where guys get hurt. He's the next man up, and I bet he plays at some point this season.
And I just want to point out, too, that just because we see this roster set now doesn't mean there aren't some other names out around the league. I mean, John Kuhn released today, a former Packer. People love him. What's the chances of another name popping up somewhere and coming over to the team now?
You know, I think it's pretty good. I think that if you were to say, you know, is the 53-man roster today going to look the same as it does next week after the Seattle game? I say no way. First of all, they're going to bring in Geronimo Allison. But second of all, it wouldn't surprise me if there's other cuts around the league that get the Packers interested. You know, they could look for an upgrade on the offensive line on the interior if they didn't feel great about their young linemen there. They could look for somebody in the defensive line if they wanted to shore that up with Montrevious Adams and his foot being a little uncertain. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if somebody else came in.
Kelly,
Finally, a week from today.
am I allowed to eat the skin on that?
I think so.
Okay.
Finally, a week from today, we'll all be at Lambeau Field watching real football that actually finally counts. Michael, what's your overall impression of this roster going into week 1 against Seattle?
Look, I think it's a really good roster. I think that Ted Thompson and the front office know that this is a team that has a chance to win the Super Bowl. And so that's why I think you probably saw a little bit more activity from these guys during the offseason than you typically do under Ted Thompson. This is a team that needs to make the NFC Championship game at a minimum. And I think there's no doubt they have the potential to win the Super Bowl this season.
We're seeing the video right now. Eddie Lacy's coming back. But then we also got to, speaking of the run game, the running backs through training camp here, there's still something left to be desired, right? They haven't proven anything yet. Is Seattle going to be maybe the ultimate test to see where the chips will fall with those guys?
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of focus from both sides on the running game. You look at Seattle's defense, and that front seven is unbelievable. And of course, they just added Sheldon Richardson in a trade to make themselves even better. So these rookie running backs plus Ty Montgomery definitely going to have their work cut out for them. On the flip side, Eddie Lacy back in Lambeau Field, you know he's going to want to run over some people. So that's going to be fun to watch.
Michael, we appreciate you staying up past your bedtime. For Michael Cohen, Kelly Price, our production crew, I'm Chris Barriere saying thanks so much for watching. Good night, and enjoy some cheese.